This is an image of a swastika drawn in blood at a grocery store parking lot in California. Sadly, these acts of hatred happen all over the country on a near daily basis. In fact, according to Kabbalah, 17 acts of hatred happen every day worldwide. And that number is only increasing. In this video, we will dive into the background of hate and anti-Semitism, explore the recent increase in it, provide statistics and examples of acts of anti-Semitism, investigate anti-Semitism through the eyes of teenagers, and learn how we can take action against anti-Semitism. People just accept hate as one thing that has always been there. But are there different categories of hate? How do people express their hate? When did hate start? And why do people hate at all? Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines hate as intense hostility and aversion, usually deriving from fear, anger, or a sense of injury. Before we can dive too deep into hate, we must first understand the different categories of hate. The categories of hate include, but are not limited to, political-based hate, race-based hate, religion-based hate, gender-based hate, sexual orientation-based hate, and wealth-based hate. Now that we know the different categories of hate, we can address how hate speech is expressed. There are two main expressions of hate crimes and hate speech. Hate speech, which is technically a hate crime, appears in forms such as the news, on social media, and any situation in which someone is speaking hatefully. Hate crimes appear through vandalism, violence, and in the most extreme cases, genocide. Most people think of hate as something that has always existed, but when did it really start? The truth is that no one is exactly sure when hate started. However, in almost all of the ancient religious texts, hate is mentioned. According to an article from How Stuff Works, hate is mentioned in the book of Genesis, as well as in Indian scripture, therefore showing hate exists at the beginning of both Christian and Jewish religions. Hate is also mentioned in the New Testament, the Dhammapada for Buddhism, and the Quran for Islam. This shows hate exists at the very foundation on which all of our societies are based on. Moving forward in time, what did hate look like during the Middle Ages? In the Middle Ages, hatred and discrimination were very prevalent. Anyone who was seen as offensive for any reason could be executed at the drop of a hat. According to an article from How Stuff Works, there was even a term for hatred, inimicitia, Latin for unfriendship. Sometimes, similar to gangs, if families had long-standing hatred and rivalries, a person could be obligated to seek vengeance, called vendetta in Italy. Today, hate still exists. As I have shown earlier in this video, it can happen by way of hate crime or hate speech. Hate can be projected by a single individual or by a whole group. According to an article from How Stuff Works, hate is often chosen by a group once they have been convinced that getting rid of another group would eliminate all of their problems. Hate propaganda is also a very convincing way that urges people to hate certain groups. As we have established, hate exists. But why do people hate? To put it simply, problems and fear are the answer. First, when people are burdened with their own problems, they tend to take it out upon others. Whether someone is having personal problems or if they are being hated upon themselves, they are likely to release their tension in some way. Unfortunately, this way is sometimes through hate and anger towards others. Second, when people are scared of others, they tend to lash out at them. People do this because they believe that lashing out first will keep them from getting hurt later. Essentially, they play offense so that they do not have to play defense later. In fact, there's actually a term for this kind of fear. It is called xenophobia, and it means the fear of outsiders. Throughout history, many people who were perceived as dictators or authoritarian leaders were xenophobic. This means that they were scared of the other. So instead of risking that the other would do something, they took action. However, most of the times, the other would not and did not attack them at all. This is why xenophobia can be very dangerous. According to an article from Psychology Today, xenophobia affects groups to mobilize to fight for themselves against others. To restate, xenophobia makes groups commit hate crimes and acts of hatred towards others. Until now, we have been talking about hate in general. Now, we are going to dive deeper into hate by way of a form of hate called anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is something that most people think started with the Holocaust. But is this true, or did it start earlier? And why do people target Jewish people in particular? According to Oxford Dictionary, anti-Semitism is hostility to or prejudice against Jews. Now that we know what anti-Semitism is, we can get to its origins. To answer the earlier question, no, anti-Semitism did not start with the Holocaust. In fact, it goes back into the ancient times. According to History.com, anti-Semitism existed back in ancient Babylonia, Greece, and Rome. Jews were shown hostility and persecuted for their origin of the ancient kingdom of Judea. They were also persecuted for wanting to maintain their religion and culture when pushed to convert or stop practicing. Additionally, the rise of Christianity did not help. In its later years, the Roman Empire was known for its Christianity, and this caused more persecution of the Jews as well as rumors and conspiracies. As time moved forward into the Middle Ages and things changed, anti-Semitism didn't. The rumors and conspiracies moved forward with time into the Middle Ages and caused a hostile environment for Jewish people living in medieval Europe. According to History.com, Jewish people were often forced to live in ghettos and identify themselves as Jews. Many Jews dealt with banking and money lending because it was seen by Christians as a dirty job only to be done by the lowest class. This resulted in Jews being forced out of several European countries, such as in the Spanish Inquisition. In the countries that they were still allowed to live in, their religious freedoms were suppressed or non-existent. Perhaps the most famous part of Jewish history is the Holocaust. The Holocaust was when Adolf Hitler and the Nazi army murdered 6 million Jews and others in concentration camps during World War II. This was the biggest genocide of the Jewish people. Even though most of the people in the U.S. have heard of the Holocaust and believe that others have too, the Anti-Defamation League Global 100 found that 1 out of 3 people believe that the Holocaust is a myth. Today, anti-Semitism still exists all over the world. Acts such as shootings in synagogues, drawing of swastikas, and denying of the Holocaust shows that anti-Semitism is unfortunately alive and well. And while shooting a synagogue will most likely result in consequences, someone who draws a swastika on a table will probably never face the consequences of his or her actions. According to the Anti-Defamation League, which studies and analyzes anti-Semitism and other forms of hate, a global survey done in the early 2010s found that about 25% of the world believes in anti-Semitic stereotypes. While on the subject of stereotypes, it is important to ask, what are some common Jewish stereotypes, are they true, and do they lead to anti-Semitism? According to Jewface, some common negative stereotypes are a Jewish mother, a Jewish princess, a self-hating Jew, and a Jewish moneylender. Out of these stereotypes, the stereotype that Jews control all the money is one of the most commonly heard and one of the most dangerous stereotypes of Jews out there. Because this stereotype is so widespread, it is a reason and an easy excuse for anti-Semitism. Discriminating against someone who controls all the money and the world is seen as justified and therefore not as hate. This stereotype must be stopped so that people can stop justifying their anti-Semitism. When understanding the history of anti-Semitism, a question comes to mind. That question is, why the Jews in particular? According to an article from Kabbalah, there are many reasons why people hate the Jews, but the main one is simply that the Jews continue to survive. In ancient times, Rome and Greece fell, but Judaism continued to survive and at some points in history even thrive. This enacts human jealousy, which is another principle that causes hate. And the Jews have continued to survive throughout history, piling the jealousy up. For example, the Jewish people survived the Black Plague at a much higher rate than others. This was because of their hygiene practices, but they were accused of practicing witchcraft. At the core of it, people hate the Jews in particular because they continue to thrive and survive. As we have established, anti-Semitism has existed for centuries and still exists today. However, in recent years, anti-Semitism has been on the rise. How much has it risen? What has caused this rise, and what does this mean for the future? Recently, anti-Semitism has risen a lot in the United States of America. According to Anti-Defamation League statistics, anti-Semitism began to climb in 2014 and started to spike in 2016. From 2016 to 2017, anti-Semitic acts surged 57%. Also, 2017 was the first year in at least a decade for every state to report an anti-Semitic incident. In 2018, the Anti-Defamation League found that the number of assaults had doubled from the year before in 2017. In 2018, the U.S. also had the deadliest attack on Jews in its country, amounting to 11 people dead at the shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. These trends continued into 2019, with one person killed at a shooting in Poway, California. All of these statistics show how anti-Semitism is on the rise. Now that we understand how much anti-Semitic acts are rising, we can begin to understand why. According to an article published by the New York Times, the rise in anti-Semitism can be attributed to three factors: the increasing hostile environment of American politics, the emboldening of extremists, and the effects of social media. When all of these things combined, they create a perfect situation for anti-Semitism to brew. These three factors work together like stepping stones. First is the American political climate. Since the election in 2016, American anti-Semitism has risen above numbers seen before. This is because in the presidential election, candidates mercilessly attacked their opponents and stomped them to the ground. As politicians are seen as role models, this has led to the American people thinking that this is now something that is acceptable to do. Add the fact that many political leaders are now speaking up about their views that are hateful and promote violence. This creates a perfect bridge to the next stepping stone. People look at government officials as role models and behave as they do. So when government officials promote bigotry and violence, the American people think that that is now something that they are allowed to do. This leads to extremists being emboldened to take their negative actions. Extremists have always existed, but with the recent political climate, they think that it is acceptable to come out with their views and take actions based on them. These actions and views are leading to an increase in hate in our country that we are seeing and feeling the effects of. And what better way for extremists to express their feelings than through social media? This is how the third stepping stone fits into place. Social media has many great purposes, but one negative purpose is that it is a great way for extremists to share their views. Basically, social media is like adding an unnecessary fuel to the fire that is hate. Using social media lets extremists share their views with the world, hence increasing the chance of another extremist will see it, be emboldened, and then take a hateful action. And thus, the cycle continues. Looking forward, if the current trends persist, hatred and anti-Semitism will continue to rise. However, if politicians can run a clean race in 2020 that models treating each other as human beings, trends may decrease. We now know what anti-Semitism is and how it has increased. So what are the numbers, and what are some examples of these acts, both big and small? Every year, the Anti-Defamation League releases an audit of the anti-Semitic acts that year. This audit is an amazing way to find information on what anti-Semitism currently looks like. According to the 2018 audit, there were a total of 1,879 incidences of anti-Semitism in the United States of America in 2018. This is the second highest number in a decade, only being surpassed by the numbers in 2017, and the third highest record over all 4 decades that the Anti-Defamation League has been conducting this audit. The annual audit is separated into 3 categories, being harassment, vandalism, and assault. In 2018, there were 1,066 reported incidences of harassment, 774 of vandalism, and 39 of assault. Now that we have a basic idea of what anti-Semitism looks like currently, we can explore more deeply. Even though it happened mid-2017, we will start with a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville. On August 12, 2017, there was a white supremacist rally that was held in Charlottesville, Virginia. While it was not strictly an anti-Semitic rally, there were many people participating who were neo-Nazi, promoting the ideology of the Nazi Party. The rally resulted in the death of one person when a white supremacist drove a car into the crowd. This rally shocked the U.S. with the blunt act of white supremacy. Moving forward, in most cases, the anti-Semitic acts seen in 2018 were similar to those seen before, but there were a few acts of hatred that stood out. First, according to the 2018 audit from the Anti-Defamation League, was a massive campaign in spring of 2018 that sent bomb threats and other anti-Semitic content-filled robocalls to Jewish community centers, schools, and synagogues, as well as certain Jewish individuals. Next was the murder of 11 Jewish people at the shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In this shooting, a gunman entered a synagogue and shot 13 people, injuring 2 and killing 11. According to the audit, this shooting was the single deadliest attack on the Jewish people in the United States ever recorded. However, while not more deadly, there was another shooting at a synagogue in 2019. This shooting took place in Poway, California on April 27th in 2019, and one person was killed trying to protect their rabbi. All of these acts are large-scale acts of anti-Semitism that have happened, but smaller-scale incidences occur all the time without much notice. According to the 2018 audit, the places where the most acts of anti-Semitism happened were public places with 476 incidences, followed by non-Jewish schools with 344. It is important to note that schools got the second highest number because schools are where children are. This means that not only does anti-Semitism affect children, but that children are being raised in climates where hatred has become the usual. One reason that anti-Semitic acts occur at schools is because children do it as a quote-unquote joke, meaning that they do not understand that their actions can seriously hurt others. For example, California teens made a swastika out of Solo cups at a party. According to an article from The Guardian, they Snapchatted the picture of the swastika and themselves doing the Nazi salute. However, high school students are not the only ones that this affects. It is appalling to learn that this happens on the middle school and even elementary school levels too. Also in California, swastikas were found carved into tables at a middle school. Unfortunately, this is not the only example of anti-Semitic drawings on school property. This is probably the most common form of anti-Semitic vandalism because all it requires is a pen. That is why swastikas are drawn on school property at schools of every age all over the United States. One example of an act of anti-Semitism that is particularly shocking is that according to Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, a 4th grader shared a Google document that included death threats as well as other anti-Semitic material. It is truly horrific that someone around the age of 10 would have the notion that any group should be hated because of their beliefs, let alone be murdered because of them. Now, in order to further understand how anti-Semitism affects real people, we are going to hear from both Jewish and non-Jewish teenagers to learn about their views surrounding anti-Semitism and how it affects them personally.
Anti-Semitism probably, I would say, is like racism, but against Jewish people, probably. Hating on Jewish people or being mean to Jewish people.
Anti-Semitism is hate and prejudice against Jews. So sometimes it takes the form of outright hate where you really despise a group of people and you're willing to act on it. Sometimes it takes smaller forms like jokes that play on the common stereotypes, like Jews controlling the world and that type of thing. So it can be outright or it can be smaller, but it's going to be painful and hurtful either way to that group of people.
I think, in my opinion, that anti-Semitism is hatred or prejudice or stereotypes, negative stereotypes that people harbor against Jewish people, against the Jewish religion, the culture, again, so not only against people, but also against the beliefs and traditions that the religion honors and creates.
I think anti-Semitism mostly comes from pure hate and from ignorance. I mean, a lot of people do hate people and are jealous of groups of people and are afraid of groups of people, and that can take the form of outright hate and acts of hate. But more often than not, I think it might just be pure ignorance. Like a middle schooler who draws a swastika on the wall, I don't think truly hates the Jewish people. I just don't think they realize what the swastika represents and what it means to the Jews and other people who see it. So, yes, sometimes it is pure hate, but I think a lot of times it's also ignorance.
I think anti-Semitism, like any form of hatred, really stems from xenophobia, from a fear of the unknown. I don't think people are born with hatred. I think you have to learn how to hate people, and a lot of that comes from growing up without exposure to other kinds of people or cultures or learning new things, and growing up in a family or a community that is scared of the unknown very often leads to one becoming an adult who is scared of the unknown. And I think when you don't know what something is or why it is the way it is or where it comes from, or you don't understand it, that leads to a kind of fear of, this is different than I am, this can hurt me, this is threatening me, rather than this is different than I am and that's okay.
Probably from the Nazis and Hitler and all that. Probably started there, and now it's carrying on to our modern day.
Yeah, my friend Michael, he's Jewish, and I've heard him said the word, but I had no clue what it was. I obviously didn't know what it meant.
I don't really think so, but probably in my lifetime, but I don't really pay attention half the time, so no, I haven't heard it.
I don't think it's necessarily that anti-Semitism, like other forms of hatred, like racism or sexism or homophobia, I don't think it's that they're on the rise again now. I think it's that they never left. And people maybe got better at hiding it for a while, or didn't feel comfortable voicing their opinions and having their sort of hatred heard. I think recently it's kind of like if someone turned the hatred faucet on, and what was kept inside for so long is now coming out. It never really left. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I don't want to say, Donald Trump getting elected is the reason for all of this, because I don't think there's one reason, and I don't think one person causes it. I think that's a part of it, though, is, having someone right now in charge of our country who's so open to voicing his opinions on everything, including his hatred or dislike or distrust of specific people or specific groups of people, makes others feel more comfortable voicing their opinion. I also think the fact that, we are becoming increasingly removed from things like the Holocaust, because of that, because there are less people now that have lived through those times, young people nowadays who didn't experience that or its direct effects. You see fascism is on the rise all over Europe because the young people now weren't alive when it happened before.
I think partly because of the election and Trump just doesn't really care, making bad decisions, in my opinion. But so yeah, I do think that has a impact.
A lot of the rise in anti-Semitism recently can be attributed to our political climate. It's not that people started having these views all of a sudden. It's that now, with the current scenario, they're willing to share these ideas, so they've taken a more center stage. With people in politics and in high places of influence sharing these ideas or hearing these ideas out or even commending these ideas, people are willing to share them like they haven't before and act on them because it's become norm, it's become normalized, and people aren't unusual to have them.
Definitely, we might not see it, but there is some of it. Just like a swastika, seeing a swastika, or some little reference of Hitler, the Nazis, or anti-Semitism kind of brings it back up. So I do think we might not see it, but it does.
I feel like any type of bullying is a problem, and it happens in every place and location. So I feel like it is a problem.
Yes, I do. I think it exists everywhere. I don't think that it can only exist in very, very obvious ways. Having white supremacist or neo-Nazi established groups, we don't seem to have that. We do in other places in our country, but that doesn't mean that hatred or anti-Semitism doesn't exist. It's definitely there, just in more subtle ways. I also think that there's a lot of, what you might say is hidden anti-Semitism, things that may seem not particularly harmful, but jokes and, biases and negative stereotypes and things like that people harbor that can be really harmful, just they're less violent and maybe harder to see.
Yes.
And
Anti-Semitism 100% exists in not necessarily as bad as other places, or people don't act on it as much, but it's definitely there. I personally have found swastikas near our local stores, and I contacted the police. At my middle school, there was an event where swastikas were written on the students. I've heard about it all over other schools. I've had stereotypical things happen to me, which aren't so much outright hate, but it's definitely people not understanding the effects. There's definitely anti-Semitism.
Well, it's been a little scary going to temple, synagogue, and hearing about these shootings, but I need to stay strong, hope that it doesn't happen, that I'm safe, I can believe in whatever I want. I have free speech laws and all that, so I just need to believe in myself and believe that I'll be fine.
Sizable Jewish population, I guess, considering that we're only 2% of America's population, which has been really helpful. I think finding yourself as a young person is always particularly difficult, especially nowadays. And I think religion is hard. I think it's not something that a lot of teenagers in California seem to be particularly invested in. So I think if you want to be more involved in your religion, oftentimes it has this negative connotation to it, and it can be hard to commit to that and say this is what I want to do. So I think having a bigger Jewish population definitely it made it nice, and it was really nice to have a community to go to. I mean, being Jewish is a huge part of who I am. It shaped my values and how I interact with other people and how I see the world and what I want to do with my life, like whether or not I would consider myself particularly religious. Being traditionally and culturally Jewish and raised with Jewish values has made me who I am. And it's hard to balance, being a teenager and having a social life and homework and college applications and, free time to read or watch TV or draw. It's hard to balance that with, like, going to Hebrew school and studying Hebrew and things like that. It's difficult. It's really hard to make time for all of it. I think having a Jewish community with other people my age helps me balance it. Whether that's through Tichon or I'm a part of a Jewish youth movement summer camp called Habonim Dror, and having that as a year-round community has helped me as well.
Say the most anti-Semitic thing that happened to me was after school. I was near Safeway and I spotted a swastika that looked like it was drawn in blood on a post outside the store, and I contacted the police. They came out and it was blood. I had gone at that point, but that was unnerving to me because I had seen hundreds of high schoolers walk by it, some of them commenting on it, some of them laughing, but no one did anything, and I was kind of dumbstruck because it was such a powerful symbol and it was so big. It wasn't like a small one hidden somewhere, that it was almost amazing to me that no one else was affected. Another thing, at club day we were promoting the Jewish Student Association and there were big crowds of people and someone dropped a coin on our table referencing the stereotype of Jews and money. It was such a big crowd that we couldn't see who did it, but that was definitely something targeted directly at Jews and at us. We couldn't really address that because you're never going to be able to trace back who dropped that coin, but we didn't hide it. So saying that you see these things and you understand these things and you're willing to fight them is going to be a lot more powerful than just letting them slide. Honestly, I identify so much with being Jewish that people don't really confront me with anti-Semitic things because they know that will not fly. But I've had peers explain direct confrontations with swastikas and Nazi salutes and similar things. So it's definitely present. I'm co-president of the Jewish Student Association, and we have a lot of Jews and non-Jews. So that's a good way to answer questions and bring things into the public that are otherwise not really said. Yeah. I've had members of my club say that they've had experiences happen to them that make them feel unsafe, and that they have little siblings that are getting bar mitzvah and they're afraid for their siblings to go to synagogue to learn the prayers for their bat mitzvah, and that's not okay. They have to keep fighting. We shouldn't be in a world like this, but not letting that get to you is what's going to make everything stronger and more equal and safer in the long run.
Like I said, there's a lot of, like, those quote-unquote harmless jokes that people make that, like, that's where it starts, You start with the jokes and that leads to, like, negative stereotypes that people have and not taking it, not taking another culture or religion or ethnicity seriously, and that leads to Holocaust jokes and forgetting the severity of it. I don't know. I would say that there have definitely been times that I have been the subject of anti-Semitic jokes, derogatory terms, things that really just aren't that funny. Nothing that I've ever felt threatened by, as in, like, this is a danger to me and my life right now. like some people face every day. I think that I've definitely faced things where I've questioned maybe the values or beliefs of some of my peers, and more indirectly, I guess, when there are threats or actions that happen nationally or globally to the Jewish community, I feel that. And it makes, when there are shootings or bomb threats at synagogues and houses of worship across the country, it makes me scared to go to my temple to pray. It makes me scared for my friends that are going, and for the little kids that are there, and for the people I know. And so I guess, yeah, what happens nationally also, makes me a little scared for our community.
Again, kind of like the question about do we see it? People don't really think that it's gonna hurt someone's feelings or it's gonna make an impact, but it really does. Making a little joke about it when people don't even know about it, it can really hurt someone. I've definitely heard. I've been close by when people have been talking about it. It doesn't make me feel good. It makes me just wanna stay strong, believe that I'm okay, and I can.
Yeah, obviously there's been like situations where like people have like drawn the
Swastika.
Yeah, the swastika, and like people have like made like Hitler references, and I know that's like a touchy situation. Like I have this one friend that like sometimes he says racist things like on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't really mean them. He just says them in like the heat of the moment. I think he thinks he's funny and he's like cool, but he really isn't.
Mm-hmm.
He's just being like mean and hurtful to people, like even if they're not like of the Jewish religion. Like he's been racist towards like other religions and like minorities.
Yeah,
and
I
stuff
actually
like that.
have heard sometimes when I'm walking past or somebody, I would listen to a conversation and they would say something like that. Or they would just do it as a joke. Sometimes I'd be like, why would you say that? They'd be like, because it's a funny joke and maybe you don't get it, but other people will.
And anti-Semitism is a problem for everyone, not just for Jews. If you have massive amounts of hate in this world, it's not going to be only directed at one group of people. It reflects the feelings of the population as a whole. So if you get rid of anti-Semitism, as amazing as that sounds, it's going to affect everyone because you're going to get rid of this ideology that hate is okay and you can hate people just for their ethnicity and their religion. And it's a way to combat racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia. It'll have massive echoes.
I think resolving any sort of hatred makes the world a better place for everyone. And each step you get to accepting people that are different from you, each little tiny step you take towards equality, towards accepting those that are different, is a huge step in the right direction for everyone. But I also don't think that resolving anti-Semitism is very plausible. I don't think you can get rid of hatred and you can't get rid of xenophobia because it always exists somewhere. But that being said, I think that, like I said, like every little thing counts. And so even if, abolishing, anti-Semitism on a mass scale where no one ever is anti-Semitic ever again is not very possible. I think that every little step you get towards having maybe just one or two people learn how to be more accepting of others is a good step.
I think it would. I mean, realistically, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
But, I do think it would help other people because there's racism, there's so many different kinds of anti-Semitism against other people. So I do think it would help.
In October of 2018, there was a shooting at the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue that was really the first time there had ever been that much violence against Jews in the United States. And it came as a shock to everyone, not as a shock that it happened, but it just had never happened before. The Jewish Student Association organized a video to commemorate those that lost their lives. And I think the most important part is that these events happen and things will happen, but you have to stand up, because letting them happen doesn't send any message. It just conveys that it's okay, that it can be normalized. But if these events happen and you reflect on what happened and then you try to change it and recognize it, that's where change happens, and that's how the world gets better. There was also a vigil from many different religions, many different races, and that was a super, super powerful experience, because it wasn't just Jews at that point, it was everyone who wants to fight against hate coming together and taking a stand. It's so important to keep up the fight, because the people that have these attacks and these views want to silence you, they want to shut you down, they want you to feel attacked, and if you use these attacks to grow stronger and to make the community as a whole better, that just goes against everything they want, and it makes you right.
Sometimes I'd be like, why would you say that? They'll be like, because it's a funny joke, and maybe you don't get it, but other people would. I'm like, maybe, how would you feel if people felt about you, like you were Jewish, and people were saying that, how Jews were like, to have all the money, and how would you feel about it? They wouldn't feel good, so why would you like make a joke out of that? Okay, now I would feel pretty annoyed. I would be like, why would you say that? It's in the past, like people should just leave it by itself, like it's not important anymore. We should just focus on the future, because really, why would people want to go back in time and like relive that? Maybe people, like old people, are still alive, probably not, or like they have ancestors that was like one of like Jews or something, and you were talking about it, and that person gets like sentimental or something. That wouldn't be like really good, so I'd rather like leave that all behind. Yeah, I would actually stand up, because I know it's not right, and people should know that it's not funny at times.
Yeah, we've like stood up against him and told him like stop making those comments, and when we did, he stopped, so that was a good thing, that he understood where we were coming from and how making jokes about Hitler and the Holocaust isn't funny. You don't know what they've been through, and you obviously don't know the feeling that they've gone through, so you don't have any right to make fun of them, or nobody has the right to make fun of everyone, especially because of the religion or the way they look. So yeah, if somebody else said a Semitism joke, I would definitely stand up against them and tell them that's not cool, and to stop.
I just sit there, let them say it, and hope that they'll learn from it. Someone will speak up, but after this interview, maybe I'll change how I do that.
So I've challenged myself to like address those jokes like head on when I hear people say them, and tell them that I don't think it's funny, or that it's anti-Semitic, or that as a Jewish person I find it offensive. I think it's really difficult to stick up to one's peers, especially to your friends. You know, there's just this fear in high school of being the odd man out, and you know, everyone wants to stand up for what they believe in, but it's really, really hard at all parts in life, and I think especially being, 15, 16, 17 at a high school, let alone a public high school where there's lots of different people and not everyone thinks like you, or has the same opinions you do, or believes the same things you do. But I think that's also good, because it forces you to be strong and stand up for what you believe in, and it also fosters all sorts of conversations with people who believe differently.
Since we have just heard about how anti-Semitism can affect all people, both Jewish and not, we will now learn how we can take action against anti-Semitism. But how exactly can we take action against anti-Semitism? The first step to taking action against anti-Semitism, no matter how redundant it sounds, is to simply not commit acts of anti-Semitism. While it may sound silly, many people who commit acts of anti-Semitism are simply ignorant. Therefore, some people simply need to be told, do not commit an act of anti-Semitism. It is hateful and it will greatly hurt someone. The next step to taking action is if someone sees something, they need to say something. This can take place in two forms. The first form can look like someone finding anti-Semitic vandalism and choosing to mention it to someone rather than just pass by it. Unfortunately, most people prefer the simpler option of not doing anything. This is as much of a problem as the committer of the act in the first place, because the more the people who pass by, the more the people who see the act of hatred and think that it is all right to do. The second form can look like someone stopping an act of anti-Semitism in the first place. This can range from a person telling their friends or peers that a joke was anti-Semitic and that they should stop, to a person learning of someone who plans on committing a violent act of anti-Semitism and alerting the police. Standing up and saying something can be difficult, but it can also make a large impact. According to Quora.com, Sir Francis Bacon said that knowledge is power. When relating to anti-Semitism, this is absolutely true. As touched on earlier, ignorance can cause a lot of the acts of anti-Semitism seen today. Educating others is a way to prevent such ignorance. People need to be educated on such things as the Holocaust so that they can understand the true past of the Jewish people, as well as on skills like the ability to recognize free speech and hate speech so that they can prevent anti-Semitism in the future. This will lead to people being able to make an informed decision before they act hatefully, and hopefully with the proper education, they will think twice before acting hatefully at all. Similar to education, another thing that can be done to take action against anti-Semitism is implementing anti-hate programs into places such as schools. The Anti-Defamation League provides 5 such programs that are made to decrease hate and anti-Semitism among students. According to their website, these programs are the A World of Difference Institute program, which is aimed for preventing bias and bullying through workshops, the No Place for Hate program, which is aimed for improvement against bias and bullying in school climates, the Words of Action program, which is aimed for educating Jewish students on how to stand up for themselves, the Bullying and Cyberbullying programs program, which is aimed for preventing bullying and cyberbullying through workshops, and the Holocaust program, which is aimed for providing resources to teachers who are teaching their students about the Holocaust. All of these programs include a way for students to learn about hate and its negative implications. Adding these programs into schools would be another way to take action against anti-Semitism through education. The final step that can be a way to take action against anti-Semitism is to support others and promote love. This may sound small, but every act of kindness is a step in the right direction. Instead of hating anyone or talking negatively about any group of people, whether Jews or not, people should only talk kindly about others. They should stand next to each other and support each other through each group's time of need. This leads to a strong, diverse community that can come together and is therefore able to fight more strongly against hate together. Then, people can go to anti-hate rallies to promote love or simply promote love by always doing their best to be kind. Through the course of this video, I hope that it has dove into the background of hate and anti-Semitism, explored the recent increase in it, provided statistics and examples of anti-Semitism, investigated anti-Semitism through the eyes of teenagers, and taught us how we can take action against anti-Semitism. I hope that you will choose love over hate, and remember,
Anti-Semitism is...
Anti-Semitism is.
Anti-Semitism is.
anti-Semitism is
real.
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 Real.